Katie, are you getting married? I came home and saw several marriage magazines on the dining room table. My wife and daughter were having a serious discussion. They looked surprised to see me. I said, "I'm home," when I came in the door, but they didn't hear me. Katie, my daughter, was staring at me. "We are," she replied, "but I don't want to join you." She spoke to me with spite in her voice, as usual. I was used to it by now. What kind of father would I be if I didn't attend my daughter's wedding? I shot back at her without flinching. My daughter gave me a blank stare, as if to say she wasn't amused. "Well, I guess it's better than only having one parent," my wife joined in saying. "Yes, that's true. Even someone like you is better than no one at all." I reluctantly agreed. Maybe it's a common problem amongst fathers, but my wife and daughter don't think highly of me. In fact, I would go so far as to say they hate me. My wife has been a housewife since we got married, and my 22-year-old daughter hasn't worked since she graduated. I've been supporting them as the sole provider of the family with no reward, but I'm still a member of this family. I decided to change my mindset and do my best for this family. "Have you set the date? Are you going to introduce your partner and their family to us?" I changed the subject. Pressing her further, she said that they were planning to have a small wedding, with only close family and friends. They were planning the ceremony for the following month. Apparently, Katie was already pregnant. She wanted to hold the ceremony before her pregnancy began showing. Her partner is still a student. It reminded me of my past, and I started to feel bitter. I'm your average 45-year-old middle-aged man. Like Katie and her partner, I had gotten my wife pregnant when I was still in college. I was stupid. I dropped out of college to work. I met my wife at a party when I was in college. I was invited by a friend who made plans with some women he'd met at a department store. I went along with him, got drunk, and partied. I woke up in a love hotel the next morning. After hooking up, my wife and I decided to get together. She told me she had gotten pregnant that night, so I dropped out of college and got married. I was able to find a job as a traffic officer. My wife and daughter think it's a lame, unskilled job. But the truth is, it's not only difficult to do, it's extremely demanding. I have to stay under the blazing sun in the summer and go out into the frigid cold in the winter. I'm required to adapt to any situation. Sometimes I even get heckled by passerby and drivers. Even so, I don't dislike the job. I owe it to my boss for hiring me. I get along well with my coworkers. I think Katie was 14 when things turned sour between us. Even before then, Katie would say, "Even a robot could wave at traffic." She belittled me, but I didn't mind. I have a specialized certification for my job. Besides being a paying job, the work is important to our society. My daughter didn't understand that yet because she was still young. I believe that someday she would understand me and my work too. One day, I happened to be assigned to work near my daughter's middle school. I saw my daughter on her way home from school with some friends. I smiled at her and waved. "Katie, get home safe," I yelled out to her. I was just a father waving to his daughter. I thought it was a perfectly normal thing to do. My daughter, however, scowled and ignored me. My coworker, who happened to see, commented, "Your daughter's at that rebellious age," and gave a wry smile. But that wasn't all that happened. To my surprise, there was an anonymous complaint. "One of your traffic officers suddenly started harassing me." The only person who could have made that complaint was my daughter. Not knowing the situation, management determined I was at fault. They let me off with a warning, but I was baffled and couldn't accept it. When I got home, I asked my daughter why she did it. But instead of answering, she got mad at me. "Don't talk to me when I'm with friends. It'd be embarrassing if they knew my dad was a street worker," she yelled at me. It seems that my daughter had lied to her friends, that her father was a wealthy corporate executive. But when I called out to her that day, her lie was exposed. The truth was she had taken it out on me. "I'm not a street worker, I'm a traffic officer," I corrected her, but it just made her even more angry. "It's the same either way. All of my friends' parents are office workers. Why does your job have to be so low class?" Katie, a person's job doesn't make them a good person. Whether they work in an office or they are a traffic officer like me, we all have to work. What kind of job it is doesn't make it important. Our society still needs people who work in the street, I explained to her calmly. But my daughter had already tuned out from the moment she insulted me. Then my wife came over. "Honey, anyone can do what you do. And besides, office workers make more money than you." She took my daughter's side. My daughter gloated that she'd won the argument. "See, I told you your job is at the bottom of the food chain." She dug her heels in and insulted me. Both of them ganging up on me started to get under my skin. "Who do you think is paying for this house?" I snapped at them, and my wife shuddered. I snapped at them, and my wife gave an exaggerated shudder. "Please, don't you go talking down to me. Then who do you suppose is raising the children?" My wife shot back. Thinking back to the number of times she had insulted my job, I couldn't believe she was playing the victim. But anything I did, my wife would pay back 10 times worse, so I held my tongue. Because I held back then, those two began to think they could get away with saying whatever they want to me. Their insults started to get worse and worse. I worked my ass off to provide for my wife and daughter. So why has it come to this? My wife just keeps hounding me with, "Go make some damn money." I was thinking of taking a long-term position that was far away but more lucrative. My wife told me, "I'll stay at my parents' place while you're away, so we'll be all right." My wife and daughter ended up staying at their parents' home, until my wife's brother wanted to move back in and kick them out. My wife treated me like some relative who just comes to visit sometimes. My wife's parents saw logic and sided with me. They scolded her to treat me more like an actual husband, but my wife's attitude didn't change. Days and months have gone by. My daughter has grown up just like her mom, always insulting me. Recently, if I take even a little extra time to get ready in the morning, my wife starts harassing me. "Come on, get to work. Time to get your useless ass out of the house." My daughter joins in saying, "Smells like ass. You sweat so much our whole damn house stinks. Get out already." It feels like I'm going to get kicked out of the house. I gave up trying to defend myself and just left. My daughter's wedding was already next week. Soon, my daughter would be living with her husband, so some of the burden would be lifted from me. That was my reason for looking forward to her wedding. But that day, things suddenly took a turn for the worst. While I was at work, I saw my wife out walking, holding hands with a man in a suit. They were far away, so I couldn't see the man's face, but I'm absolutely sure it was my wife. If they were just walking together and not holding hands, I would have thought it was just a passerby who happened to ask for directions. But that wasn't the case. They were clearly being clingy as if they were in a relationship. I'm so perceptive, I knew it right away. My wife was having an affair. I felt my face getting hot. On top of treating me so cruelly, she was dating another man. It made me even more upset to see her with a man in a suit. The reason she'd put me down for doing a working-class job was because she was dating a man with a cushy office job instead. It made my blood boil. I would never forgive her. I decided to get proof of her affair. As excited as I was, my anticipation soon turned to worry. My entire salary went to my family, and I had barely anything left. I was far too short on money for a detective or a lawyer. I was still at work, but I desperately started thinking about what I should do. By the time my shift ended, I had thought of an idea. I started to act immediately. First, I reached out to my coworkers to ask for their help. My coworkers each work at different locations, so I mostly got in touch with the ones who work close to my house. I sent them photos of my wife and told them to contact me if they saw her. Then I went to buy a certain something that even I could afford to set up. A few days later, I got a text. It was the very day before my daughter's wedding. The message came from a downtown traffic officer. He got a clear photo of my wife and her partner. He told me that after that, they went into a hotel together. When traffic officers are at work, we don't usually have time to take photos, so I had reached out to some other workers as well. They were able to track my wife while they were on lunch break. I was grateful to my coworkers, but also conflicted. The next day was my daughter's wedding. I was disappointed that my wife was still having an affair right up until the wedding. My daughter's image flashed to my mind. I was certain of my wife's affair, but I wondered if my daughter knew about it. But I forgot about those worries as soon as I saw the face of my wife's partner. My daughter has long fussed over her naturally curly hair, but then I noticed that the man in the photo had curly hair too. Not only his hair, even his face was so similar to Katie's. No matter how I look at it, he must be her father. My daughter doesn't look anything like me or my wife, but my wife said that she looks like her grandfather, so I believed her. If we did a DNA test, I could find out for sure, but I could tell even without scientific proof. My wife's affair hadn't started today or yesterday. She must have been cheating on me all along. Although I was shaken by the realization, I was also somehow relieved. The reason I didn't leave my wife, despite her continuous insults, was because of our daughter. Since she was a baby, I had believed she was my daughter and raised her as my own. No matter how much she hated me, I believed that she was my flesh and blood, so I always held back. But now I don't have to. That's why I felt relieved. After my shift ended, I went to see a lawyer. My company's lawyer had heard about my situation. He told me to come as soon as I had gathered proof. Coincidentally, the lawyer had also recently divorced his wife. It turns out she was only with him for the money. "I'll get you a win no matter what," he told me. His words gave me motivation. Maybe the lawyer is mixing in his personal grudge with my case, but regardless, I'm grateful. It had gotten late, so I returned home. "You're so late," my wife yelled at me. Normally, she never cares no matter what time I get home, but since the next day was our daughter's wedding, she seemed to be on edge. My wife had no idea that I had gotten proof of her affair. As always, she spoke to me harshly. "If you oversleep and you're late tomorrow, I'll never forgive you." She got real close and pointed her finger. I was tired, and so I snapped. "You better watch your mouth. I'm the one who's not going to forgive you for what you've done." Well, what are you talking about? Don't take that tone with me." Maybe my wife didn't expect I would talk back to her. She flinched a little. Once I'd started, I couldn't stop myself from saying the rest. "I know that Katie isn't mine," I said, and showed my wife the photo. My wife looked shocked for a moment. "That's all in the past. What's the point of bringing it up now? Tomorrow is Katie's wedding day," she said. "Of course it still matters now." I was so completely done with her attitude. She didn't have to beg for forgiveness, but she could at least have apologized from the heart. Then I might have felt like forgiving her even a little, but she didn't take accountability at all. I definitely wouldn't forgive her. My wife was making such a racket that my daughter woke up. "What are you all screaming about at this hour? How am I supposed to get my beauty rest for the wedding?" she yelled at us. My wife and daughter only think of themselves. I looked at my wife and daughter, then went to the bedroom. I brought the bag that I always use when I travel for work. I was used to traveling, so packing up my things didn't take more than 5 minutes. I laughed at how few belongings I had. "What are you laughing at? You're being creepy," my wife said. "Wait a sec, where are you going?" my wife yelled at me, but instead I wondered, why should I bother to attend the wedding of another man's child, with the woman who had viciously tricked me? I took a deep breath. "Give me a break. You and Katie have insulted me for so long and I hated it. Have you ever thought about my feelings at all? I've tried my hardest to be a good husband, a good father. What about you two? You've abused me for long enough. If you were going to use me as just a bank account, you should have at least been nicer to me. I can't stay with a wife who treats me so horribly and has an ongoing affair. Katie isn't even my child, so I won't give either of you financial support again. You all told me to get out of here day after day. I'll do as you wish and disappear, but you'll both have to pay for what you've done to me." After saying my piece, I left. I didn't bother to respond to my wife and Katie, who were both screaming at me. I already knew where I was going and what I had to do next. Cutting ties with them made me feel a lot better. I skipped out on my daughter's wedding and decided to go into hiding for a while. The next day, I got several calls to my cell phone, but I didn't answer a single one. My wife and daughter left message after message insulting me, and sent me texts saying such horrible things I couldn't even bear to read them. For a while, they kept saying, "We'll never forgive you," and "We'll sue you for what you've done." But as time passed, the messages changed. My wife texted me, "Please come back, I love you." I burst out laughing when I saw that. She finally seemed to get it that I wasn't coming back, but it was too late. The CEO of my company had let me stay in company housing, and I was preparing to sue both my wife and her lover. On the day that I caught my wife's affair, I had put something in our house. It's a wiretap. I don't have much disposable income. I can't afford a private investigator, but I knew my wife and daughter would talk behind my back when I wasn't around. All according to plan, the conversation with my wife and daughter was recorded perfectly. Apparently, Katie already knew that I wasn't her father. "Let's invite my real father to the wedding," she said. "Take this chance to ditch that old man and marry my real dad," my wife told her. "I can't, Katie. He's already married and lives with his in-laws. He doesn't love his wife at all, but his father-in-law is an executive at the company he works at. If he ever breaks up with his wife, he'll be forced to quit and he'll go broke." My wife got upset and said, "If he only hadn't found out I was cheating. Katie, you've got to be careful not to get found out either," she warned Katie. My daughter didn't seem concerned. "I wouldn't screw up like that. He loves me too much to doubt me." She laughed haughtily. I was shocked. I couldn't believe Katie had also deceived me, just like her mother. My wife and daughter had exposed themselves, and so I had proof for the divorce proceedings and the trial to get compensation for the affair. Both went in my favor from start to finish. The results of my daughter's DNA test showed that she really was the child of my wife's illicit lover. Her lover was the son-in-law of a certain company executive. He had worked at his father-in-law's company, but lost his job because his wife divorced him. He got what was coming to him. I contacted Katie's husband's family. I had them listen to the recording from the wiretap. As soon as they heard it, Katie's husband filed for divorce and sued her for damages. Katie came after me, yelling at me that I'd ruined her life. But really, it was her fault for trying to deceive innocent people. Katie's husband's family thanked me for helping their son. They wrote me a check. I was able to divorce my wife and sell our house. I took the amount of money that my wife owed me for damages out of her portion from the sale of our house. I got my payment in a single lump sum, leaving my wife penniless. My in-laws apologized to me profusely. They disowned my wife out of spite. Now my ex-wife and her daughter live together in a tiny, cheap apartment. Since everything has come to an end, I feel like I've finally taken my life back. I had already spent so much time traveling for work that I had a lot of friends in so many places. I have so much more free time and money to spare. Sometimes I travel for pleasure. I'm so grateful for this peaceful life where I don't have to be abused anymore.